The night your father dies is supposed to be the night you become a man. But at 14, I became a coward instead. And for 15 years, I've been lying to everyone, including myself, that I ever deserved to call myself his son. The call came at 11:47 p.m. I remember the exact minute because I was sneaking a cigarette behind the Gongju Sangku, and the clock tower in our town square had just stopped chiming. My mother's voice was strange, not hysterical, not tearful, just empty, like someone had scooped out everything that made her human and left only a recording. "Come home, Arin. Your father has had an accident." I ran 3 miles through a monsoon that night. My lungs were on fire, my shoes filled with so much water I had to kick them off halfway. But here's what I didn't do. I didn't call an ambulance. I didn't scream for the neighbors. I didn't even pray. Because somewhere in that 14-year-old chest of mine, I already knew. My father, Vikram Sen, the man who built a shipping empire from a single rusted boat, the man who could stare down gangsters and government ministers without blinking, that man did not have accidents. Accidents happen to other people. So when I burst through the back door of our estate and saw him lying at the bottom of the main staircase, his neck twisted at an angle that should have been impossible, his eyes still open and fixed on the chandelier above, I froze. Not for a second, not for a minute. I froze for what felt like forever. My mother was standing at the top of the stairs, her hand over her mouth. My older brother, Kian, was already on his phone, but I couldn't hear what he was saying. My sister, Mira, was sobbing in the corner of the living room, her knees pulled up to her chin like a child half her age. And my uncle, Dhruv, my father's younger brother, was just standing in the doorway to the study, holding a glass of whiskey, watching. No one moved toward the body. No one checked for a pulse. And that's when the first crack appeared in the story I had told myself for 15 years. Because instead of running down those stairs, instead of cradling his head, instead of even whispering his name, I turned around and ran back out into the rain. I ran until my legs gave out. I ran until I collapsed in a drainage ditch 2 miles away, covered in mud and leeches, and shame so hot it felt like my skin was melting off. I didn't go to the funeral. I didn't speak at the memorial. I told myself it was because I couldn't bear to see him like that. But the truth, the ugly, selfish, unforgivable truth, was that I was terrified. Not of death, not of grief. I was terrified of whatever I had seen in my family's faces that night, because none of them looked surprised. They looked like they had been waiting. 15 years later, I came back. I was 29, with a new name, a new face in a way, and a single obsession that had hollowed me out from the inside. I had spent every day since that night building a life that didn't require me to think about Vikram Sen. I became a forensic accountant, a bloodhound for financial rot. I told myself it was because I wanted to help people, but really, I wanted to understand how things fell apart, how a man could be alive 1 minute and gone the next, how a family could stand at the top of a staircase and just watch. The trigger was a photograph. I was auditing a shell company in Singapore, just another ghost corporation hiding money for someone who didn't want to pay taxes, when I found a transaction record from 15 years ago. A payment of exactly $3 million, routed through 7 different accounts, finally ending up in a private trust. The trust name was the Sen Legacy Foundation. I knew that name. My mother had set it up a month before my father died. According to the documents, the foundation was meant to preserve my father's artistic and philanthropic contributions. But Vikram Sen had no artistic contributions. He was a businessman. He hated art. He once threw a painting into a river because he said it was lying about the color of the sky. So why did my mother create a foundation for a man who was still alive at the time? I started digging. At first, it was just a few late nights, a few favors called in. Then, it became a fever. I quit my job. I liquidated my savings. I told myself I was looking for the truth about who killed my father, but the deeper I went, the more I realized no one had ever been charged with his murder. There was no investigation. The police report was a single page. Cause of death: accidental fall. No autopsy, no interviews, no follow-up. The entire thing had been swept under a rug the size of a football field, and the people who swept it were still living in my family's estate, still spending my father's money, still pretending to grieve a man none of them had ever really known. I returned to my hometown on a Tuesday. The estate hadn't changed. The same iron gates, the same overgrown bougainvillea, the same fountain that hadn't worked since I was a child. My mother answered the door. She looked older, of course, but her eyes were the same, empty, waiting. She didn't hug me. She didn't ask where I had been for 15 years. She just stepped aside and said, "Your room is still upstairs." No surprise, no anger, no relief, just acceptance. Like she had always known I would come back. And that's when I started to understand that I wasn't walking into a home. I was walking into a trap. My brother Kian was the first to fall. He was the golden child, tall, charming, ruthless in the way that only people who have never suffered can be. He had taken over my father's shipping business and run it into the ground, but you wouldn't know it from the way he dressed. He still wore custom suits, still drove a car worth more than most people's houses, still talked like he owned the world. I started small, a whispered rumor here, a leaked document there. I knew from my years as an accountant that Kian had been skimming from the company for over a decade. He had set up a dummy supplier in the Cayman Islands, a company with a sole director listed as K. Sen. Within a week, the creditors called in their loans. Within a month, Sen Shipping was bankrupt. Kian lost everything: the company, the cars, the house in the hills, the respect of everyone who had ever bowed to him. I watched him from across the street as the bank repossessed his favorite Mercedes. He was screaming into his phone, his face purple with rage, his expensive shoes splashing through a puddle of gutter water. And for the first time in 15 years, I felt something other than shame. It felt like hunger. But here's the twist I didn't see coming. Kian didn't come after me. He didn't even suspect me. Instead, he went to my mother. He stood in the foyer of the estate, the same foyer where our father had died, and he accused her of ruining him. "You set this up. You and your foundation. You've been waiting to take everything from me." My mother didn't deny it. She just looked at him with those empty eyes and said, "Your father always said you were too greedy to survive." That was the first time I realized my mother wasn't a victim. She was a co-conspirator, and I had no idea what she was conspiring toward. Mira was next. My sister had always been the quiet one, the one who faded into the background. After my father died, she had become a recluse, rarely leaving her room, speaking only in whispers. I had felt sorry for her for 15 years. I had told myself that she was broken by grief, that she was the only innocent one in that house. I was wrong. Mira's sin was different. Not greed, not ambition. Betrayal. I found the letters hidden in the back of her closet during one of my late-night explorations of the estate. They were love letters, dozens of them, all written in the same elegant hand. But they weren't addressed to some secret boyfriend. They were addressed to my father's biggest rival, a man named Arjun Rathore, who had spent 20 years trying to destroy Vikram Sen's business. And the letters weren't just romantic, they were strategic. Mira had been feeding Rathor information for years: shipping routes, customer lists, weakness in the supply chain. Every time my father lost a contract, every time a deal fell through, every time he came home with that look of quiet fury in his eyes, it was her, his own daughter. For money, for attention, for reasons I still don't fully understand. My revenge on Mira was surgical. I didn't expose her publicly. That would have been too easy, too merciful. Instead, I arranged for Arjun Rathor to receive an anonymous tip that Mira had been keeping copies of every letter she sent him, and that she had been planning to sell them to a journalist. Rathor was a paranoid man. He didn't investigate. He didn't ask questions. He simply cut her off. No more money, no more calls, no more secret meetings in hotels where they could pretend no one was watching. I watched Mira unravel over the following weeks. She started drinking before noon. She stopped bathing. She would sit in the garden for hours, staring at nothing, her lips moving silently like she was still writing letters that no one would ever read. One night, I found her in the kitchen at 3 a.m., holding a knife. She wasn't going to hurt anyone else. She was going to hurt herself. I took the knife from her hands, and she didn't resist. She just looked at me with eyes that reminded me so much of our mothers and whispered, "You have no idea what you've done." I thought she was talking about her own collapse. I thought she was blaming me for Rathor abandoning her. But now I realize she wasn't warning me about herself. She was warning me about what was still coming. Uncle Dhruv was the hardest, not because he was smart, he was actually quite stupid, but because he had nothing to lose. While Kian had greed and Mira had secrets, Dhruv had only cruelty. He was the one who had stood in the doorway that night, drinking whiskey, watching my father's body. I had never forgotten that image. It had haunted my dreams for 15 years. Dhruv's weakness was his temper. He had a history of violence, bar fights, assault charges, rumors of worse things that had been quietly settled with money. I didn't need to invent anything. I just needed to point a camera. It took me 3 months to get the footage I wanted. Dhruv had a favorite bar on the outskirts of town, a filthy place where no one asked questions. I paid the bartender a small fortune to let me install a hidden camera behind the liquor shelf. For weeks, nothing happened. Dhruv would drink, stumble home, sleep it off. Then, one night, a young waiter accidentally spilled a drink on him. What happened next was almost too grotesque to describe. Dhruv didn't just hit the waiter, he beat him. He kept beating him long after the man was unconscious. He would have killed him if other patrons hadn't intervened. I sent the footage to every news outlet in the country. Within 48 hours, Dhruv was a national pariah. His face was on every screen. His name was trending for all the wrong reasons. He was arrested, charged with attempted murder, and denied bail because the judge had seen the video and couldn't stop shaking. I didn't feel good about this one. The waiter had really suffered, but I told myself that was Dhruv's fault, not mine. I told myself I was just revealing the truth. That's what I told myself. The night Dhruv was taken into custody, my mother called me into her study, the same study where my father had spent his final hours, signing papers and drinking tea, unaware that he had only minutes to live. My mother was sitting behind his desk, her desk now, with a file folder in front of her. 3 down, 1 to go. I didn't understand. "What are you talking about?" She opened the folder. Inside were photographs. Photographs of me. Photographs of me breaking into Kian's office. Photographs of me planting the documents that ruined his company. Photographs of me talking to the bartender, paying him in cash, installing the camera. She had known everything. She had been watching me the entire time. You think you've been taking revenge for your father's death, but you haven't even begun to understand what happened that night. Your father isn't dead, Arin. He's been waiting for you to come home." I laughed. I actually laughed. It was the only response my brain could generate. But she didn't laugh. She just turned the folder around to show me the last photograph. It was a recent picture. A man, older now, with gray at his temples and a scar across his left cheek that I didn't recognize. He was standing in front of a fireplace, our fireplace, the one in the study, and he was smiling. It was the same smile I remembered from childhood, the same smile he gave me when I won the school spelling bee, the same smile he gave me the day he taught me to ride a bicycle. It was Vikram Sen, alive 15 years after I watched him die. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't hold the photograph. I dropped it on the desk and my mother picked it up, smoothing the edges like it was something precious. "Your father loved you more than anyone," she said. "More than Kian, more than Mira, more than me." And that was the problem. Because he needed to know if that love would make you brave. I couldn't speak. My throat had closed up. The night he died was a test, a final test for all of you. Kian failed the moment he tried to call a lawyer instead of an ambulance. Mira failed the moment she felt relief instead of grief. Dhruv failed the moment he smiled. But you were the only one your father truly cared about. He waited at the bottom of those stairs, playing dead, listening for your footsteps. And what did you do? You ran. You ran like a coward, and you kept running for 15 years. I remembered it then. Not the running, something else. Something I had buried so deep I had convinced myself it never happened. Just before I turned to flee, just before I bolted out the back door into the rain, I had seen my father's hand move. A twitch, a finger lifting off the floor and then dropping again. I had seen it. My brain had registered it. And I had still run away. Because if he was alive, that meant I had a choice. I could go to him. I could save him. I could prove that I was the son he wanted me to be. But I was 14 years old, soaked in rain and fear, and I chose to believe he was already dead because that was easier. That was the real sin, not running away, choosing to believe he was gone so I wouldn't have to save him. "He's been watching you for 15 years, my mother said. Every job you took, every city you lived in, every time you ran from a relationship, every time you lied about your past, he saw it all. And he waited, because he wanted to see if you would ever come back and face the truth. But you didn't. You came back for revenge. You came back to destroy everyone except yourself. And that, Arin, is the final proof that you are exactly the coward he always feared you would be." The study door opened. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I could smell him. The same sandalwood cologne, the same pipe tobacco, the same presence that had filled every room of my childhood. Vikram Sen walked past me and sat down behind his desk, across from my mother. He looked older. The scar on his cheek was livid, purple and twisted, but his eyes were the same, sharp, calculating, disappointed. "Hello, son," he said. His voice was exactly as I remembered it. That was the cruelest part. "You've been busy, ruining your brother, destroying your sister, sending your uncle to prison, all while pretending to be a detective when really you were just a boy too scared to ask the one question that mattered. What if I was wrong about everything? I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. Why? The word came out as a whisper. Why would you do this to us? He leaned back in his chair. For a moment, something flickered across his face, something that might have been sadness or might have been satisfaction. Because I built this family from nothing, he said. I bled for it. I killed for it. And I needed to know if any of you were worthy of carrying it forward. Kian was a thief. Mira was a traitor. Dhruv was a monster. And you... He paused, and the disappointment in his eyes hardened into something worse, something like certainty. You are a coward, but unlike the others, you have a chance to prove me wrong. The revenge you took on them was ugly. It was cruel. It was everything I taught you to be. But it was also brilliant. You dismantled a shipping empire with nothing but paper and patience. You broke a traitor without ever touching her. You exposed a monster without getting your hands dirty. That is not the work of a coward, Arin. That is the work of a son who finally understands his father. He slid a document across the desk, a contract. At the top, in bold letters, the Sen Legacy Foundation, successorship clause. 15 years ago, I faked my death to test my children. None of you passed that one, but the test of consequence. You ran away, yes, but you came back. And you didn't come back for money or power or forgiveness. You came back for blood. That is the only thing I have ever respected. So here is your revenge, Arin. Not against your family, against me. Sign this paper, and everything I own becomes yours. The shipping lines we rebuilt in secret, the properties, the offshore accounts, every rupee, every dollar, every cent. You will have the power to destroy me completely. You can expose me. You can ruin me. You can send me to prison for faking my death and committing fraud in 3 different countries. Or you can join me. You can sit in this chair, in this house, and become exactly what I always hoped you would be, my heir. My mother was smiling now, a real smile, not the empty one she had worn for 15 years, and I understood. The entire thing, the death, the test, the 15 years of silence, the revenge I thought was mine, had all been engineered. They had let me destroy my siblings, they had watched me become a monster, and now they were offering me the throne. Because in their eyes, the only child worthy of inheriting the Sen Empire was the one cruel enough to take it. I looked at the contract. I looked at my father's scarred face. I looked at my mother's smile. And for the first time in 15 years, I made a choice that wasn't based on fear. I picked up the pen. I signed my name, but not on the dotted line. I signed it on the back of the photograph, the one of my father, alive, smiling, standing beneath the fireplace. Then I walked out of the study, out of the estate, past the fountain that still didn't work, through the iron gates that had always felt like a prison. I didn't run this time. I walked, slowly, deliberately. I walked to the police station, and I handed the photograph to the officer on duty. "I am Arin Sen," I said. "I'd like to report a fraud and a family of ghosts." The revenge I took wasn't the one my father wanted. It wasn't cruel or brilliant or worthy of his empire. It was simple. It was final. It was the one thing he never expected from the son he thought was a coward. I walked away, and I took everything with me.